So our next two guests, I'd like to introduce them. We have Betty Robertson, who's a narrative designer and writer at Ubisoft Montreal. She's worked on Assassin's Creed Odyssey and on the Odyssey Story Packs. She considers herself a snappy dresser and funnier than she actually is. As well, we have Fahantidou. She's a level designer at Ubisoft Montreal. She was a quest designer for Assassin's Creed Odyssey and the Odyssey Story Packs. She denies that she has a coffee addiction and that she understands French. So please give a warm welcome to Betty and Eva. I'm sorry for butchering your last name.
No, you're fine. Hello.
Here's your. You stand on the side. You don't stand in front of the podium. And then here's a clicker, right? So just press left and right.
Yep.
And laser point to.
I have to do the clicker? Yeah, I'll see it. You sure
You put your water here. If you want. Yeah. That way you can grab it. Yeah. And then it's more personable, right?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Oh, wow. Just testing that, making sure that it works.
Hi, I'm Eva.
And I'm Betty, and I'm getting over a cold, so my voice sounds like this.
And we're here to talk to you about quest design and narrative design and marriage.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of marriage counseling. It's a little bit of game design. It's going to be a fun time. So we have a symbiotic relationship in terms of design, but a lot of people don't really know what either of what we do is defined as. And so we're here to clear up some misconceptions.
So I'm the mission/quest designer, which we will clear up a bit as we go on. But basically what I do is I script cool objectives for our players to follow through.
And I am the one who writes the words. So, what is game writing? Many people mistake film writing for game writing, and they show up with their 60-page screenplay, really excited to, get started on their movie. And many people mistake game writing for game writing, and that's because it differs depending on the kind of game, the scope of the game, the size of the studio you're working on. And so game writing takes many forms. And it's creating the context and motivation in the story of a video game. And I really emphasize on video game here because movies are not games. Don't write your game like a movie. Now, we're also going to touch on a topic called narrative design, and that is the job of integrating the context into the game's design. Sometimes they're the same job. In indie studios, it's often wearing many different hats, and so the writer will be in charge of that, or maybe it might even be the UI artist who's in charge of that. But somebody needs to put the script into the game. And sometimes they're separate. So a game writer's job at the end of the day is to give the player a reason to care about where the next part of the game is, to make them keep going even if they're not having fun, to motivate them. So we're going to talk about what is mission design.
So mission and quest design is a little more vague since it's something that is more specific to games that have question missions, if that makes any sense. So many people mistake game design for mission design. Game design being an umbrella term that a lot of companies use to mean any design at all that goes into video games. Many people mistake game design for game design, going to say that from company to company and from project to project, what the title game designer means could mean severely different things. So I'll just very briefly go over that in just a second. There are many disciplines of design within a game team, and mostly for the quest designer's job is all about objectives. So the three pillars that I kind of divided designers on to just make everything a little more clear are systems. What is there to do? What can the player see? What can the player interact with? How does everything work in the game? World, which is how does the game exist within the digital space? How does the player approach situations? What can they see in what order? And progression. How fast do they get to experience the game? What's their XP levels at different points? Do they have to do microtransactions to continue? So within each one of those three disciplines, there's a lot more of smaller roles and smaller hats to wear, but it depends, again, from studio to studio. If you're in an indie studio, you're probably wearing like all of these hats at the same time. If you're working in a big studio, well, you could be under world design, but you're not doing world design per se. You're not doing like moving objects in space. You're doing scripting. You're doing mission design.
So, who designs what at the end of the day? We're going to start with something as simple as a door, which is in the reality that we exist in. Doors exist, and you can walk through them, you can open them, you can lock them, you can close them, you can slam them. But in a video game, you need to decide if you can do any of those things, if doors exist even at all. And so this right here is taken from Elizabeth England's article, The Door Problem, from 2014. That's available online if you want to look that up. And so right from the conception, you need to decide on the existence of doors. Can they be opened? What does it take to open them? How can we tell if they can be opened? And that goes from those who are in charge of the concept, so that's the director's decision. And then this goes all the way down to the game or systems designer who writes the documentation and decides how that's going to be integrated.
Then the level designer will say, okay, so I took the door as it works, as you said it works. I put it on my level and I threw away the key. The UI designer will say, okay, I put objective icon on the door and you can see it from your minimap as well. The progression designer could say, okay, you're going to get this much XP for opening the door. You're going to have to pay $5 to open the door. I generally don't touch those subjects because they're very, very interesting nowadays. And the quest designer will say, okay, once you open the door, there's going to be 3 guys behind the door and they'll all shout and charge at you.
Then when it gets down to the writer, we have to decide why you wanted to open the door in the first place. And so the princess is behind that door. The governor's behind that door. We have to go kick his ass. Door's open. We can do that now. So here's Quest Designer's Toolbox with it.
So for quest design in specific, what we have to work with is beats. That could be, again, redefined from project to project. But basically, when we talk about beats, we talk about very simple objectives and interactions that the players can do, like collect, kill, carry, talk to. And those vary from game to game. But whenever they're defined, that's it. That's your toolkit. You can only use those tools. But you need to find a way to use them in a way that is very creative and not always the exact same thing, which is a challenge. We brought up Breath of the Wild because it's a fantastically systemic game that allows you all of the verbs and beats that you see. Yeah.
By Dre. So the game writer's main tools are context. I'm going to use Breath of the Wild again for consistency. So we decide what happens between the tasks to inform the reason for the action. So instead of just going out and killing stuff because it's there, you get asked by a little old lady to go and kill all of these dudes who are on her property. And we have to decide, why does the old lady feel this way? Why are the guys on her property? And to give the context of the whole story so it's not just a beat 'em up or, a loot farm for the entirety of the game. So why kill? Catch for who? Collect for how much money?
So the mission designer responsibilities are to make sure that the objectives flow in a harmonious way, that the player doesn't feel bored by repeating the same task over and over again, and that we use the beats that we have in a way that goes harmonically with a scenario that we were given and we talked about with our writer, that the gameplay reflects what the narrative is saying. And all of the rest of the stuff.
Oh, okay. So the writer's responsibilities, starting from the beginning, is character creation, which is a really important thing that can happen from the beginning and go all the way throughout the game because there's often a lot of iteration in this process. It takes time to create Sonic the Hedgehog or Mario or Link, but it needs to be a cool dude who the player is willing to look at for 80 hours. They need to be shaped like a friend. So then from there we get the story, which is we have this cool guy now, so what does he do? Why does he do it? Where does he go? Then, once the story ball has gotten rolling and we kind of know what we're doing and what it's about, we have to keep story continuity, which is that everything needs to make sense in every quest so that it feels like the same game across the board. So one person is doing this with their story, and then somebody else needs to be doing something that is tangentially related to the main plot. So after that, we get the narrative design, which is plugging in the spaces where the story is going to be. And then from there, the dialogue, which is we finally get to the point where the character talks to people and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And we iterate on that as well. And then this sounds counterintuitive, but it's just how it goes, which is naming is kind of the last thing that we lock because everything is subject to change all the time, which is, oh, it turns out that there's a lawsuit, so we can't use that name for that thing. So I guess we have to change his name from Knuckles to Toe Knuckles.
But that's also why you get really interesting code names from within production floors for varying things until eventually they're named into something new that ships, but no one on the floor like calls it that. They call it something different. But that's why that happens.
Our working our working title for the project is from 3 game versions ago, so it made sense at one point, but not anymore.
So what does a mission designer want? Ideally, we want to make sure that all the mechanics we have are used like constantly in innovative ways and that we follow the script and we make sure that whatever the player is doing, they haven't gotten bored, they haven't gotten tired of repeating the same action, and that there's a satisfying reward for everything they do. And ultimately, we want to make sure that we make memorable moments.
What does the writer want? For the game to be good. Really, we just want to make sure that the character motivations and personality remain consistent and they line up with the kind of game that we're making. We also care about making memorable moments. We want to make sure that there's a single tear running down your cheek as the credits are rolling, that you're really thinking about the game, that you've got it in your heart after running around collecting coins for 20 hours.
So,
oh, and this is how it affects our writing. As a game writer, like a question that we often have is, can we make this? Which is
No.
No. I've got this really cool idea. No. But we don't have the money. They are 2 people standing outside of a fruit stand having a conversation like this, and then they go, "I should go."
we have the money for that.
Yeah. And what you had in mind was this great epic love story between 2 people with, slow zooms on their faces, and you can feel the emotions, and I should go. Video games. You want a cool chase sequence? We don't have the money for that. So what I always say to people who want to get into game writing is lower your expectations, man. Be happy if you have a custom character model. And this even goes all the way up to the top, which is that sometimes there are directors who get lofty ideas and they're like, we're going to do the next cinematic experience. It's going to be a video game, but it's going to be a 45-hour-long movie. You're going to carry so many packages.
And then your mission designers cry in having no gameplay.
But is it fun? Don't ask questions like that. That's not what we're in the business of. So here's the great question, kind of touching on that. Which comes first?
And honestly, it depends. You could have had a game that decided to go more narrative heavy and have very obviously put more emphasis in their world building and what is the story that they're telling, and maybe have a long time of running cutscenes. Or you could have a game that decided to be more systemic, more quest gameplay heavy, like Breath of the Wild that I love so much. But yeah, this is a very pressing question, any dev floor, like which one will you prioritize?
And sometimes it comes to blows, It's a little bit of friendly dueling over what our priorities are.
That's why this counseling session is here.
Yeah. So we're going to give an example of what our collaboration looks like in practice on the floor. So we're going to start from the job of the narrative director. So I'll play that role, put on my narrative director hat. So I get the premise, I get the job from the director saying, we've got a quest for you guys to make. It's the beginning of the game. You're meeting the king. You're getting to know all the characters in his court. And we want the character to be introduced and to get to know how things work in the gameplay. And so I say, cool, I'll do that. And then I don't do it and I wait till the last minute. No, that's, I'm very motivated. I do my job all the time. So I come up with a design, which is we talk to the king, we get his big character intro. It's like a wrestling match. He comes in and there's like streamers and he smashes the table and it's like the king of Hyrule, because we're still playing Zelda. And he tells us that there has been a murder most foul at his court, and that we need to investigate and find who the culprit is. And so we do our investigation, we find out, and then we have our key suspect, who is, let's say, the cook. So we talk to the cook, and he is kind of shady, and we manage to throw him off, and he runs, and we have this big chase scene through the castle, and so we have all of these great cinematic moments of seeing all of these distant areas we're going to explore in the game. And then after we catch him, we drag him back and show him to the king, and the king suplexes him through the floor, and we get a mission complete.
And then I take this and I say, we can't do that. So this is also kind of what my documentation looks like when we're in that stage of creating a quest. So I look at the script and I'm like, well, we don't have chases in our game. That doesn't exist. I'm sorry. But instead of just presenting a problem and being a douchebag to my very nice narrative designer, I say, well, we don't have a chase scene, but we could do something else instead. What if when you go talk to the cook, you can't really exactly tell that he's the bad guy immediately, so you have to stalk him for a little bit, and then you see him go get his poison, and then you know that it's him, and then you go talk to the king. Narrative dress-up is not my thing, obviously. But this is what I do. I come up with gameplay, and then I send it to my writer, who goes,
okay.
But
and then I rewrite it.
Exactly. But yeah, a lot of times, especially for mission designers, narrative dress-up also changes what our beats mean. So a lot of times you could have a beat that literally is collect, but by putting it on top of a hill surrounded by 10 enemies, then that collect has changed its context into you have to go find this very important item. But that also means that when we bring this up with our narrative designers, sometimes we already have a very specific idea of what the narrative is around this gameplay beat, which is where conflicts can start arising.
There's no way I'm collecting that item.
But it's really cool on top of a hill.
Okay, we'll make it a wedding ring. You have to save it.
Yes. Okay.
So, at the end of the day, it's about our collaboration and compromise, which is what any good marriage is about at the end of the day.
Listen to your writer or your quest designer. Make sure that whenever you're talking about whatever you're trying to make, you're both listening and contributing to each other's ideas. There is no perfect solution for both of you because budget, but by talking and communicating on both of your visions and where you would like to go with this, what you have as tools and what you can and cannot do, this is how you make your best quest.
Our game is our baby, or our quest is our baby. And together we're trying to raise it, we're trying to make it the best kid it can be. And sometimes the director comes along and they take our baby and they put it in the garbage. And we gotta hold hands and buck up and get through this and make a better baby for the director.
So get along with your writer or quest designer because you have to raise that baby together. And at the end, when the game has shipped and you're in the postmortem and you decide whether or not you want to break up or not, at least your baby is out there and is doing okay.
Yeah. And you can really tell when a game was made by a divorced narrative designer and mission designer because it's like the people who made this quest, they were talking through a lawyer. I can't tell what's supposed to be happening here. So this is where we were going to have a question period, but I guess that's not happening. So
Do we? No.
we're going to thank you all for your time.
Thank you.